Hello and welcome. I'm Lucas Livingston, the Executive Director of Chicago Hyde Park Village, and I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker for today, Patricia Morse, Hyde Park Trish, as we all know her well. She's a Hyde Park blogger, an historian, a storyteller, fascinated by the transformations in her own neighborhood and ours, Hyde Park in Chicago. Trish received her doctorate from the University of Chicago. And then, after teaching American Studies and Literature at Union College, at St. Louis University and Michigan State University, she returned to Hyde Park, where she's served on multiple organizations: the Executive Council of Hyde Park-Kenwood Community Conference, the Hyde Park Garden Fair, Hyde Park Used Book Sale. And Trish authors a monthly history column at the Hyde Park Herald. And you can find her online at Trish. Well, you have to remind me the URL for your website.
I'll put it in the chat. Yeah.
Fabulous. Great, great. And yeah, without further
Although I
ado,
might do
I'm
that
happy to
later because I don't want to disturb my
your screen share. Sure, sure, sure.
Okay, so hopefully you see this, what I'm seeing now, which is my introductory slide and the frog desperately trying to get a beer. So that's my theme, is the struggle to get a beer in Hyde Park. So I was invited to talk about, to get people in the mood for Oktobfest. And I said, oh, sure. Yeah, no, this isn't going to be a problem. Turns out, first of all, that Oktobfest is not something anybody talks about until after World War II, when Lufthansa starts sending people to Munich as a travel destination. It's strictly a Munich thing. So I thought, well, what's Oktobfest? It's joining your friends outdoors with a beer and bratwurst and listening to German music. So how did that go? Well, it turns out it didn't go very well in Hyde Park. That's my theme. And I looked at why, and I realized a lot of it is the theme of temperance and prohibition, and the fact that, and timing. Because the Germans got here before there was a Hyde Park. So the city starts in 1833. They show up right away, literally the same year. And this is a map done in the 1970s of ethnic groups. And you can see they're very clever. The green is Irish, the orange is German. And they're settling along the river, the south branch and the main branch of the river, because that's the harbor. That's where all the industry is. That's where stuff comes and goes. And so that's where the jobs are. So they're putting the factories there where the workers are. And so that's the concentration of Germans is north of the river and little pockets in the south. And the people that show up right away, of course, are economic refugees looking for a better future. I'm not sure it's a thrilling future, though this is the bunch of guys later obviously after photography, later in the 19th century, who are working in a German furniture factory up north of the river. The thing is about Germans, is there's a second wave that shows up in 1848. Everybody refers to as the 48ers. And these are guys who rebelled in 1848, trying to create a unified Germany that was liberal and reform. And it's a failed revolution, and they're not able to stay in Germany. So they come here. So it's a little different crowd. They are political. They are organized. They are a little better educated, and they're very ambitious. And so they're the ones who really seem to start investing in breweries and saloons right away as a source of making money. And this is, it is very lucrative. By 1847, they've brought over yeast to make lager beer, which both the Irish and the Germans prefer. And it's seen as very alien, and this foreign substance that they're consuming. This is not what Yankees are consuming and Southerners, native-born Americans. And one of the things about that map, that's the ethnic blob map from the 1970s, is they assumed that white Anglo-Saxon Protestants are not an ethnic group. They're not a blob, but there they are. And they don't like the growing numbers of these Irish and Germans. So by 1855, they've elected this guy, Levi Boone. he's a know-nothing in the know-nothing party, and there's some assemblymen who are also, I mean, council, aldermen that are also know-nothings. And he's anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, anti-saloon. So he goes, so one of the things that's a conflict between the groups is the Protestants are thinking the Sabbath is something that is quiet. You spend most of it in church, and you read the Bible, you don't buy and sell, and you definitely don't listen to loud music. You sing hymns at most. The Germans, who are working 6 days a week, 12-hour days, think Sunday is for getting out of the house, having a beer, having good food, being with your friends, and listening to loud German music. So the contrast in cultures is what Levi Boone is trying to crush. So he tries Sunday rules. That doesn't quite work at this time. So he goes after the saloons, and they license the saloons with a very high fee in order to hopefully drive a lot of them out of business, and they just ignore him. He's angry. One of the things he does is he fires everyone in city government who's not native born American. And then he he arrests 33 saloon owners who are not paying these license fees. This causes a riot. And part of the riot is 600 Germans and Irish are marching on City Hall from the north of the river. They get onto the Clark Street Bridge, which is low, and it rotates, doesn't lift, it rotates, and the police rotate the bridge and then shoot into the crowd. So the battle lines are literally drawn, that Temperance is about being anti-German, anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, anti-saloon, anti this other culture that the Protestants don't like. So particularly the 1848ers, but a number of the Irish and other people are all making fortunes in breweries. And I was kind of startled to find out that some of the movers and shakers who get their name on streets, like Diversey, Wacker, they're brewers. That's how they got the money and power. They're aldermen. They are running big hunks of the city of Chicago, and they're still all clustered along the river. And of course, it's along the river and north of the river that burns in 1871. So they take out, the fire takes out 19 breweries. And one of the things about beer at the time is it still has to be fresh. There aren't all the bottling, pasteurizing, refrigeration stuff, to make it last. So they take out these 19 breweries. And I think I have a theory as I was pursuing this. I have to see if actual beer historians agree with me, but I have a theory that what happened here is, I know a fact, which is that in this beer vacuum, Milwaukee brewers were sending beer into Chicago, and St. Louis was sending beer into Chicago. And so you get Milwaukee and St. Louis developing the idea that you export beer and you have an expanding beer market. Chicago breweries seem not to think along those lines, which is one reason I think they eventually peter out in the 20th century. Meanwhile, we have Hyde Park. So, of course, Paul Cornell starts Hyde Park in the 1850s when he gives land to the Illinois Central Railroad to run through what he owns and create a passenger station at 53rd Street, well, the future 53rd Street. And the idea he has is he needs a passenger station because this is going to be a commuter suburb of upper middle class people. It's going to be a nice suburb, and it works almost right away. You get really wealthy people buying large estates up in Kenwood that shrink down to be giant mansions. And you get doctors showing up. So those houses from 1860 on Dorchester, I think one of them was a doctor. And yeah, so this is a different thing. And this thing that's circled in blue is dry. And and if you notice, of course, Hyde Park is enormous, the Hyde Park Township. He walls off the other part of Hyde Park Township with the parks, with the South Park Commission. So you have Washington Park, the Midway, and Jackson Park being the boundary of this fine residential district that he's envisioning. And then the bottom part is for industrial development. So that's why you have Pullman down there, and you have the steel mills, and he himself had a clock factory in Grand Crossing. And that's where you start noticing there's Germans by the 1880s, when there's a cable car system. And like the thicker orange area, there's 3 German language churches. There's a German language school, there's German American associations, and there's a smaller presence that shows up in Grand Crossing. And that's wet. So below 70th Street is kind of the limit of the prohibition zones. The bottom part, what the town does, which is run by the people who run the village, is they again impose these high licensing, so they make a lot of money, and they depress the number of saloons. And saloons are important for the working class because, again, they only have Sunday. So if they're going to cash a paycheck, the saloon will cash their paycheck. There are no public restrooms, so the only way you're going to get a bathroom anywhere in this area in all of Chicago is a saloon, or a restaurant, and oh, and of course, occasionally you get the free lunch. There is no such thing as. So this is how Hyde Park is, and so when the Germans are coming in, there's also a second wave of, maybe a third wave of Germans that come in the later 19th century, which is when this area gets settled, and they are socialists, they are union organizers, they are much more drawn to the industrial area, they're not genteel. So you do find a couple of references to Germans in Hyde Park proper. There's like a little blurb about a thrifty man who lives in a tiny cottage at 58th and Cottage Grove, and he's in the 1870s, 1880s, and he's working for he's a laborer working for the South Park Commission, and he has an ailing daughter. So that's this little blurb. Where you really see them, though, is on Lake Park. So there's a fluke in Paul Cornell's plan, which is he gave a rather wide right-of-way to the Illinois Central, which means they control Lake Park from 51st to 56th. It's outside the village, so it's not dry. It's very, very wet, very, very full of alcohol. And this is where you see some German names, Irish names. Black entrepreneurs have saloons and casinos. I mean, it's where you can start making your money. I wanted to look at this one partly because it's a famous photo of early Hyde Park. It's this Charles Friedrich's Family Resort opens in the 1880s, and it's about where the Walgreens is now on 55th Street. One of the things I wanted to point to is it's called Family Resort, and there's this fundamental divide between the Germans and these mainline Protestants about what saloons mean. For the Protestants, they're dens of iniquity, they're the road to perdition, they're full of sin, and they ruin families. And there's no doubt that alcohol is a problem. Working conditions are appalling. There are many reasons to drink your sorrows away, but for the Germans, it's where the women's group meets, literally in this building. It's where there's, your children come with a pail to get your pail of beer, and it's not good to drink the water. Remember, Chicago water is literally deadly until they reverse the Chicago River. There are cholera epidemics, so it's a good thing to drink your lager. Friedrich's, and pretty soon after this photo, it's called Adolph's. They have a beer garden in the back with lovely vine-covered fences around it. The other thing I want to point in this picture is the sign, the Conrad Seep sign. That's not just a paid ad. that's actually saying what kind of beer you can find inside. Because these licenses were so expensive, the saloon owners turned to the brewers and said, hey, can you help us out? And the brewer said, yes, but then we have an exclusive contract. So this is a place, if you like Conrad Seep beer, you're going to have to buy it here. And here's Conrad Seep. He's a 48er. He rose up from driving a beer wagon to owning the big brewery. And it's a sign of what the 48ers did, is as they built money and power, they got into the politics. He was a city treasurer for a while. Oh, and I wanted to mention, just because I really like these beer gardens, is there was also a very lovely one, Laubersheimer's, to the south of this along Lake Park. And it apparently had saved old growth oak trees. So it was beautifully shaded. So it just sounds lovely. So this is a district. I mean, this is a known area for alcohol from 54th to 56th. So at one point, after they get annexed by Chicago and there's clear licensing, you can come up with about 30 places purveying alcohol. I mean, it is busy within a 2 block. Of course, it's both sides of the street. This is the east side of Lake Park. The train tracks haven't been raised yet. They're behind these buildings. And you can see that this is a variety of people. This is, the Ryans are across from Friedrichs, and they're specializing in Keeley lager. Down on the bottom right, you can see the cable car. That's part of why they really thought this would work, because they could bring in people that were thirsty. So we get to annexation. That happens 1889. And what happens is the invitation comes out from the city of Chicago to its suburbs, and it says, you want to be part of Chicago. And that's starting to look more attractive. When Cornell started in 1850, it didn't take that much to run a town, but by the 1880s, people expect sewers and sidewalks and streetlights, and it starts being expensive and a lot of work to make sure everybody's got what they need. So you can turn all that over to the city. This sounds appealing. Well, it's not appealing to the board, which is primarily people who live in the Blue Circle, the village, is, the fear they would lose their voice, because they're kind of reform Lincoln Republicans, and Chicago politics is a whole other deal. But they're really afraid that they're going to lose their prohibition districts. And here's a map on the left of the prohibition districts. So they're the white, you can buy alcohol where there's a hash mark pattern, where it's blank is dry. You can drink alcohol, you can own alcohol, but you can't buy and sell it. And they say to Chicago, we're not doing it. We need to be, we need to have this anti-saloon stuff. And Chicago says, oh no, okay, that's okay. We'll let you keep it. We'll let you keep the prohibition districts. So they agree to take it to a vote. So they have a vote across the entire area. And Hyde Park still doesn't want it. They want their independence. They want their prohibition districts. The whole bottom part of Hyde Park Township, they all want to be in Chicago. They want to get out of it under these Presbyterians that are running things. And so this becomes the part of the Chicago. So here's this map. And right afterwards, of course, they start talking about the World's Fair. And where's the World's Fair going to go? And if it goes into Jackson Park, what are we going to do about these prohibition districts? So the board of managers of the fair are extremely worried that they're not going to make money. This is extremely expensive. They're pouring money into it, and they're hoping for a profit, but what they really don't want to do is take a big loss. So they're worried about it. Are people going to come? And then they look at this and they think, well, are people going to come if they have no alcohol to drink? And also they had concession stands that they were trying to get to, because that's how they really were going to make money, is the concessions on the Midway. And the concessions, particularly on the Midway, are saying, if we can't say alcohol, this isn't going to work. So one of the things that the fair figures out is a loophole, which is these prohibition districts allowed clubs and hotels. So if you paid to be a member of a club, you could buy and sell alcohol inside the club. And if you paid to be staying at a hotel, you could buy alcohol at the bar. So the loophole that the fair guys said was, oh, okay, so you have to pay to get into the fair. So that counts. We can sell alcohol at the fair. So that made them happy. But then you have everybody who wants to make money who's outside the fairgrounds, and they look at this. And the Saloon Keepers Association gets up a big petition, several thousand signatures, and they're petitioning to overthrow this whole system. Which introduces us to this guy, Arthur Burge Farwell. He's a traveling salesman, deacon of the Kenwood Evangelical Church, and absolutely dogged opposer to saloons for the whole rest of his life. I mean, it's really, the persistence is admirable in a way. He doesn't care about the fair. He doesn't want all nations are welcome. He doesn't want them to feel like, oh, their wine and beer are here. He wants to enforce these prohibition laws. So when the Saloon Keepers Association comes up with this scheme to overthrow the prohibition zones, he may be the first. I don't know. I'll have to talk to somebody who's an election historian to find out. But he is definitely one of the early guys to defeat something by looking at all the signatures on the petition. So he and his team find 800 fraudulent signatures, and they managed to throw the petition out. So yes, the prohibition zones are in force. So if you're going to sell alcohol in this area, you're not going to have a license. And if you sell alcohol without a license, you are a blind pig. So now his crusade is to track down the blind pigs, the people in the hotels and in the restaurants who are selling alcohol illegally. And he goes to the Chicago police and he says, are you going to investigate them? And they say, we take our orders from the mayor. So he goes to the mayor, and the mayor says, we don't hire no spies. So Farwell does what he does for his whole career from now on. He then turns to the press. And he gets a reporter to go. And I'm glad he did, because the reporter explains how you got your illegal beer. He went to a known restaurant on 63rd Street during the fair. And he goes in and he says to the bouncer, I'm here to buy a beer. And the bouncer says, well, we don't sell beer. I heard that you do. He says, oh, well, would you like a cold tea? If you'd like a cold tea, you can go through that door. And so he goes through the door, and it's a huge back room, it's absolutely jammed, 5 bartenders, and of course it's full of people drinking. Cold tea is beer. And he tests this on other things, and in fact, other restaurants on 63rd Street. And in fact, cold tea is the key word. So there's another imposition on people, which is Sunday at the fair. So it's authorized by Congress, so that the president of the United States is actually the one who invites all these countries to participate in the World's Fair, to make it a World's Fair. And that's one reason why everybody shows up, and it's a giant thing, and it's authorized by Congress. Unfortunately, in the middle of authorizing this, they inserted a clause that says the fair had to close on Sundays. And that was to accommodate everybody's Protestant constituents who, yeah, that Sunday is not at all when you have frivolity like the fair. And again, the guys trying to make money, the board of managers who have been dumped huge sums of money into this and really want to get it back, there's all this back and forth, we want to talk, why are we going to open, what's going to happen? And of course, it's eventually people start noticing 2 things. One is if you travel from far away, or you come from Europe, you've got you're here for like a week. There's one whole day where you can't see the fair. It took us, as a gauge, somebody once said, they estimated that it would take 21 days straight in order to see everything at the fair. So yeah, you're missing out. The other thing they're worried about is, they would like people in Chicago to come. I mean, they want to get the admission money, and all of the workers, I mean, basically every worker in Chicago only has one day off, and it's Sunday. So the fair guys are looking at this and saying, we're not going to make money. And in fact, people, there's stories in the newspaper about people coming to the gates, being unable to come in. So they turn around and they do what they can on the west side of Stony, which is a bunch of, really, some of these are quite strange. Some of these are historic panoramas. And of course, one of them is Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. And he makes a fortune because of the Sunday roll, because he's open on a Sunday. So May, they open up, and the attendance is terrible. They're really getting scared. The weather isn't good, but also the word is out that there aren't, that things aren't quite ready. And in fact, the Ferris wheel doesn't open until July. So the fair guys, again, rack their brains for a loophole, and they decide, oh, well, the fair is in a park. Parks are always open on Sundays. So we can fit the letter of the law if the 14 themed buildings, the so-called White City, are the things that are closed. And so they charge admission, they get admission on Sundays, and people can come and walk around. And of course, the thing that's really open is the Midway. And out on the Midway, we have actually a number of beer gardens. And one of the popular ones is, of course, the German Village. So you, once you pay your admission to the fair, you then pay a second admission to get into the German Village. And that gives you, the center building is a museum, and you can see medieval armor, you can see fancy lace, you can see all kinds of things, porcelain. But what people really want to do is get under the trees. So let me go back and point out. These are old growth trees. They saved trees out on the Midway, so you can see how leafy it is. And the German Village, unlike the other brew gardens, in fact, gave you something that you could not find anywhere else in the fair, which is a seat in the shade. So it was really popular, not just with Germans. It was, everybody wanted to come in, and you could get a nice meal. You had to pay. I mean, to sit here, you actually had to buy something. You got a nice meal, you could get a big stein of beer, and you listened to these guys who are the Prussian military band. So it starts to the fair, I think. It's not just, well, there are a lot of Germans in Chicago. There's like 1/4 of the population is now German and German extraction. But it also expands out this idea that this idea of enjoying yourselves outside with beer and food and music is something that's nice to do, spreads outward from the German community. So if you go to the fair Monday through Saturday, you can go in the exhibits. So this is the agriculture building. And inside, there's an upper gallery, and the breweries occupied most of the side of one of the upper galleries. It was big. So to lure people to go up the stairs to come and look at the breweries, you could get free samples. So you could drink beer from Japan, Brazil, Australia, Italy, a variety of other places, and of course, a bunch of American beer. And this is where companies had to apply to get in. And the idea of being a company at the World's Fair was, it was about marketing and pushing forward to have an expanded market. And so they spent a fortune to try to make their booth the most glamorous, to make it so people really needed to come and see you. And, they really, it was central to their marketing. And you can see that coming out of the fair, where, I mean, to this day, Pabst Blue Ribbon points out that they won the best beer at the World's Fair. Schlitz designs the globe with the ribbon, so they're the world at the World's Fair. I mean, their marketing is really oriented towards this and their push outwards. And this is also where I kind of thought yeah, something's going on with these Chicago brewers because they don't participate. There's only 2 brewers. There are dozens and dozens of breweries in Chicago, and some of them are huge, like the Schoenhofens, and they don't participate. So they're not looking for this expanded audience, apparently. So after the fair, Farwell does not go away. He's busy. He goes after anything that's still a blind pig. And so Hyde Park has become the hotel district. It nationally known. People come up on the IC. They live in these residential hotels for the summer with the cool lake breezes. And they have these bars, and they're okay if you are a guest of the hotel, but if they sell to anybody else, yeah, they're a blind pig. And he's out there trying to document them all. And when he finds the documentation, he goes to the police, and the police basically toss it in the wastebasket. He goes to a judge, they toss it in the wastebasket. They don't, whatever. And so he goes to the press. So periodically he has these exposés in the press of things in Hyde Park, like the Del Prado. This is when the Del Prado was still on the Midway, before it moved and had a blind pig. So he's going after anybody he can, and one of the things he goes after is the Schoenhofen brewery. Well, not the brewery, but the Schoenhofens. The brewery starts in the 1860s, and one reason I want to talk about it, there's several reasons, but one I want to talk about is this pretty much the only sign that there was this whole huge brewery industry in Chicago. One corner of one building is saved, and it's up on 18th Street in what they're calling the Brewery Historic District. But it doesn't at all give the sense. So this is actually not the Schoenhofen Brewery in this drawing. I couldn't find them, but it gives you a sense of the scale, because it covered, at one point, the newspaper claimed it covered 15 acres. These are how industrial these brewers have become. They're, of course, things have developed. They have bottling, they have pasteurization, they have refrigeration, and and shipments of these grain elevators, and that's why they're along the canals and rivers. So they're, this is big business, many jobs. And they tend to have their own, oh yeah, I was going to mention, it didn't matter how long you were here. So, Schoenhofen is an early arrival. I don't know for sure if he's a 48er, but he's in that time frame. He dies. Somebody else runs it for a while. His family reclaims it. So by World War I, he built this, it seems like his ads are completely hilarious. So he built his water tower to look like a beer bottle. But during World War I, suddenly everybody's turning against the Germans again, of course, and they, sauerkraut becomes victory cabbage. And there's a conspiracy theory that he's broadcasting radio signals to the Kaiser from this water tower. So, yeah, it can turn against you when you don't expect it. So their premier beer is Edelweiss beer, and he decides to open. So there've been beer gardens on Cottage Grove since the 1860s. North of Hyde Park, and they're opening now more down on Hyde Park. Of course, the cable car comes through, and it's a lot of audience that they figure they can grab. This is a big one, so it's at 51st and Cottage Grove, and of course, Farwell, who goes after all of them, goes after it. So there's a clause now where they can get a liquor license if they can get a majority of property owners in their area to agree that they could get a liquor license. So they do due diligence, they get the signatures. Farwell can't break the petition, so it goes through, and he thinks he gets the license. And then Farwell takes him to court, and he gets the court to agree that the definition of neighbors is much larger, is like double in size. So he doesn't have the signatures, but he's already open and operating, and it's big. I mean, it's every night there's a 35-piece orchestra playing. So he does the other thing he can do legally, which is he turns it into a club, and claims that there are 2,500 members of his club. And Farwell says, that's a fraud. And he takes him to court. And then he figures out another way to take him to court. And he keeps taking him to court. So, this is sort of endless. So this is 1899 to 1916. And in 1916, he looks down the street and he realizes the Midway Gardens have gone bankrupt. Now there's been a beer garden at the corner, south of 60th, west of Cottage Grove, since the fair. Because these got really popular, and it's evolved into the Midway Gardens. And he says, okay, that's safe. So he gets thousands of signatures anywhere he can possibly conceive of. So he has this huge petition that he turns in. They give him his liquor license, and it's still protested. People claim that it's near a school. Well, the school it's near is the University of Chicago, which is in its Big Ten era with dozens and dozens of fraternities. They are actually the customers of the beer gardens. So yeah, it's not corrupting the youth. So he gets to buy Midway Gardens, and he renames it as Edelweiss Gardens. And now he owns the biggest, most extravagant, most artistic, amazing beer garden that Chicago produced. Because this is Frank Lloyd Wright's Midway Gardens, and it's just an enormous extravaganza. And as you got to really pack them in to make it work, but it works for the Edelweiss. Wright gets very cranky about them because it's much more dance hall, and it's much more vaudeville, and it's much more entertainment oriented. But it works for Edelweiss, works for Schoenhofen until. For 4 years, until, of course, Prohibition. It's clearly not going to pay off, and he sells it in 1921, and then it's torn down by 1929. So that's an unintended consequence of Prohibition, which is sort of my theme next. So Prohibition was the triumph of the Protestants. It was the triumph of the temperance movement. And what they got was a whole set of problems. So one of the problems for Chicago was 1/4 of the budget for the city of Chicago was saloon licenses. And now they're gone. I mean, just gone. So they're begging. They have this whole campaign. Oh, please let us, not hard stuff. How about beer? Can we sell beer? And no. And of course the breweries are somewhat in trouble. They employ hundreds and hundreds of people, so it's really threatening. But they can make near beer, so they can act like they're making near beer, even if they're making real beer. And another unintended consequence is these guys. So it's the Chicago outfit. And so I got reading about Colosimo for another wander down a back road that I ended up on. Colosimo was the founder of the Chicago outfit. He's running prostitution and various other things out of the Levee, which is the vice district. Sorry about the backing up dump truck beeping. Anyway, he's in this contained crime area. And Prohibition comes in and he says, yeah, I don't want to do alcohol. And I kept thinking about why, and I'll have to see if I can pursue this in guys who've done research in gang stuff. But my bet is he didn't want to expand out of what he was managing, which is this vice district where the police were definitely leaving alone and whatever the consequences were. But he didn't want to get into alcohol. And his lieutenant, the guy in the middle, Johnny Torrio, has him removed. He gets many shots are piled into his body outside his restaurant. So Johnny Torrio takes over, and he buys, according to one source, 65 breweries. So they're pretending to make near beer, they're making real beer, and that's, the beer continues to flow. And now the vice district is the entire city of Chicago, which was one of my points, that one of the unintended consequences is suddenly you have in upper middle class Hyde Park, you've got, they're not super duper visible, but they're clearly all around. So when Johnny Torrio is taken out, he managed to survive, only because the guy ran out of bullets. But he's taken to the Jackson Park Hospital, so he's right south of Hyde Park. Al Capone, his lieutenant, his brother lives on Hyde Park Boulevard. Yeah, and it's pretty clear that the mob is very involved. I have a feeling, again, I don't have the data, the evidence, but I have a feeling that the mob was buying up some of these buildings because they were controlling some of the activity in all parts of the buildings, and they certainly had the cash. And that's because there were many ways to get your beer, your alcohol. And of course, one of the unintended consequences, a lot more people are drinking hard alcohol instead of beer and wine. You can get it from your pharmacy. You can get it from your newsstand. You can get it from your bellhop. You can, of course, go to the speakeasies. But I found out by checking things out at the University of Chicago publications that, in fact, speakeasies are really inexpensive. And so the students say, oh, the speakeasies are for your date. When you want to impress your date, you go to the beer flats when you just want to drink. This, again, we're still in the Big Ten, big frat era of the university. So I think there were an awful lot of these beer flats, judging by the number that actually get outed in the police blotter. And you get outed, really, it's really obvious that somebody phones in a complaint. And so they have to check it out. They're not investigating. So there's one account where they arrest 16 people. Take them to the the station. They just released 13 of them. One of them they keep because he's actually got a warrant for an extremely violent crime. And two that are running it, and we're talking barrels of beer, kegs, full cases of bottles. These two guys are fined $10 and released. So yeah, the whole thing is a system, and it's operating in Hyde Park. So after Prohibition, there are more bars than ever because everybody's afraid they're going to reinstate the Prohibition zones because they were legal when Prohibition went in. And the city of Chicago says, yeah, nah, they want the license money. Yeah, no. So yeah, so now liquor's legal as long as you got a license. But the main drag for booze is still Lake Park, and it migrates up 55th Street. And it's really is an awful lot of bars. There's different numbers people trot out. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's a lot. I mean, for instance, there was an article in the Herald where they said these 12 bars have just lost their 4 a.m. license. Well, 4 of them lost a 4 a.m. license. There's a lot of other bars that have 4 a.m. licenses. And I talked to somebody that was living here before urban renewal and as a little girl, and she said, yeah, you stepped over the drunks sleeping on the sidewalk, and they urinated in the corners, and they would mug you and yell, and it was bad. I mean, they started calling it a Skid Row. And so we get urban renewal. It's no accident. So the University of Chicago has been trying to get rid of the alcohol situation on Lake Park since it was founded in 1892. They tried indirect ways, they tried direct ways. And so with urban renewal, and the design is their urban planners, they just wipe it out. There is no more Lake Park as it was known. I mean, the whole left side of the street is gone. The whole area that the IC might possibly control is pavement. Yeah, it's just gone. And the other thing that may also have been part of this is the more noticeable possible mob ownership is along Lake Park. And so they pushed them out of the neighborhood too. So there's one survivor, the Woodlawn Tap, Jimmy's, in the Lake Park 55th zone. And I mean, you get other guys who kind of escape and run around on 53rd, but of these 2 blocks, one survives, Jimmy's, because it's the university bar. And one of the things I'm quite interested in is that basically have that beer garden vibe. But, as I was reading about the beer gardens, and I was thinking, how nice. The only really missing thing for some of them, I mean, some of them actually even music in the city, but they have this outdoor, eating, and get your beer and nice company, and yeah, it's resurrected itself in the aftermath of COVID in the neighborhood. So that's my talk. And I will stop sharing. Sorry about the dump truck. Does anybody have any questions?
Thanks so much, Trish. Just one thing that two things popped into my mind. One, blind pig. I guess I hadn't known
I didn't,
that term for
yeah.
someone who what was it? Someone who was not licensed to sell beer but was selling it. Is that
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've heard that more in the context of that it's a name for a well-known beer today on the West Coast, Russian River Brewing, one of their
exactly.
flagship IPAs. So it's kind of
And that's
a
why,
fun
yeah.
tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. And the other comment just to make, you brought up the Conrad Sipe Brewing, and that actually the great granddaughter of Conrad Sipe relaunched the brewery a few years back, and in Chicago and up in Black Point Estate in Wisconsin, which I think was kind of their Conrad Sipe's vacation home. So yeah, and so that beer was around for a while, and I think you can still find Sipes is the modern reboot here and there around in Chicago. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, I thought about it, and it was just too long. I mean, everything was too long, but of course now we have this craft beer era. So we're back in the era of Chicago breweries.
Mhm.
I can put a link in the chat to just an article about the Sipes Brewing relaunch if anybody's interested. Yeah. Great.
This is in the very beginning, you mentioned lager versus other kinds of beer. Do you want to explain a little bit? I don't know a lot about beer. Maybe some of the others don't either.
I'm not I'm definitely not an aficionado. Apparently, Yankees, true Americans, drank beer that was very dark and thick and very hoppy.
Ah,
So a very different flavor. And yes, and this lager was sort of thin and golden and
okay.
and but also, I mean, I think of it, the water was horrible. You were smart if you drank, so it was
Mhm.
probably easier to drink a bunch of lager than this other beer.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and one simple way you can think if you want to really quickly crystallize in your mind a difference between lager and ale, think, ale is more like English beer and Irish beer, versus German beer would be more like lagers. I mean, of course, that's a very
Simplistic.
rudimentary,
Yes, but it
simple
does.
kind
Yeah.
of distinction, but it gives you a little sense. The English beers are a little heavier, a little
Yeah.
thicker,
Okay.
often darker, although that doesn't necessarily have to be the distinction. But yeah, and lagers are lighter and crisper. Yeah, yeah, great.
Well,
And there
where
was a
does
question in the
Guinness
chat.
fit
Oh, go
in?
ahead. Yeah, Guinness is an ale. That's a Irish and German style. Yeah, or sorry, Irish English style. Yeah, ale, a stout. Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is it a
Yep.
heavier beer though in taste?
That's the interesting thing, right? I mean, Guinness, there's even a lot of their advertising is like Guinness is good for you. Guinness, it's like a meal in a glass, right? But
Yes.
it's thick and heavy, but it's also a very modest alcohol level, right? Only
Oh,
like
really?
4% or so. Yeah, yeah. So it's less alcohol than Miller Lite.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
really?
That's interesting.
Yeah,
No wonder my brother likes Miller Lite.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Susan, yeah, I see your hand up.
Well, mostly a comment. I want to thank you, Trish.
Yeah.
This is just fascinating. We all
Mhm.
know bits and pieces of the history of Hyde Park, Prohibition and the fair, and to bring it all together,
Yeah.
around the topic of beer.
Beer.
It works. It's great, but it also introduces so many other aspects, and I'm going to have to listen to this again so I get it all. But I really want to thank you. It's great. You've done a lot of research on this. Clearly.
Yeah, it was one of the ones. Well, it turned out to be an area I really didn't know much about, and was I was heading down all kinds of weird rabbit holes. So, which will start showing up in my newsletter, because they just didn't fit. But it's, there's this weird intersection between the div school and the mob that I bumped into.
Oh, would love to know more about that.
Yes, yes, yes. Your next talk, Trish.
Yeah.
I see there are a couple of questions in the chat box. I don't know how we get to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Well,
I got my hand-
I got my hand up. Can I?
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Go ahead.
What I was thinking about, we had a good friend who was a Roman Catholic priest, academic in Belgium. And I can remember an evening when he took us to the Belgium beer gardens. And he wanted us to taste all the different varieties, and was very disappointed when Paula and I copped out at noon, at midnight. But anyway, but there are cultures, the European cultures, where beer and wine are
yeah.
a part of their culture, and they don't. Maybe is it because they're Catholic and they didn't have the Protestant temperance movement, which also generated the mobs, right? And created a whole criminal kind of thing
Mhm.
around drinking. But it's just interesting to think about different cultures and their attitude towards alcohol and all the things that go along with that. So it was very interesting, Trish. Thank you very much
Yeah.
for letting us know more about Hyde Park.
Mhm.
Yes. It made us all a little thirsty. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I need a
Right.
beer. Someone else, Colin
Yeah.
has a hand up.
Oh, go ahead,
Yes.
Colin. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you. And first of all, I just want to repeat, thank you so much for this talk. It was really, really informative. I actually teach German at the university. I've done little units about the lager beer riots and about the German saloons, beer gardens, etc. But the way you brought all that together, connected with the Club and Exposition, is just fascinating. And I also just didn't know that much about, you associate Germans more with the north side, but these little pockets of Germans on the south side, something that people don't know as much about. And so that was really, really great. And I just really wanted to review some points. There was so packed with information. Totally new to me. There was a beer garden, a German beer garden with old growth oaks on, you say 51st and Cottage Grove. Is that where that was?
No, the one with the oaks was on Lake Park, in that Lake Park district along the trail.
Oh, that was okay. That was in Lake Park. But there was another one, like the Edelweiss
So
garden.
there was one very early. The Edelweiss was 51st, but on 50th there was the Germania, and then in the 1860s there was the Clements, which I couldn't get an exact address, but it looked like it was perhaps at 39. I mean, it was like over the border from Hyde Park. So it came in early when, and outside the dry, so it could, set up. Yeah, the Republicans had a tendency to meet at Clemens Beer Garden, which advertised that, German was spoken. So, it was definitely,
Right.
even though the name is so clearly German, it was a German beer garden.
But there were more beer gardens, German beer gardens on the north side. So I guess this is the ones on the south side near Hyde Park were really mostly for non-Germans, right? Just showing that this became a more popular trend, or were they also Germans going to these?
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is all pretty recent research because I did it for this talk.
Okay.
But my sense is so Clements, I think, is far enough north that it's towards where the breweries were starting, actually. So I think
Okay, so the
it's
workers
starting to get up towards,
yeah.
we would think of it as Pilsen now, but areas that are along the South Branch and stuff.
Right.
So I think that was actually appealing to Germans. After the fair, they're clearly appealing to many people, but they're on the cable car line, so they can get people from all over.
Yeah.
That's the point. That's why it's
Um,
an entertainment district west of Cottage Grove and south of 60th. So you have the White City, you have Sanssouci, you have a whole bunch of these big amusement parks and beer gardens all sprouting along the cable car line.
and that's also where there was a racetrack, right? In that
Yeah, the
general area.
racetrack has actually gone by the, the
Ah,
racetrack is
okay.
south of Washington Park. So if you looked at that map of where the prohibition zones are, right immediately south of Washington Park is a place where you can drink. That's the Washington Park racetrack. And after
Wow.
the track is
Right.
gone, the Washington Park Club.
I mean, another thing, I just can't believe I didn't know this. Frank Lloyd Wright designed a freaking beer garden in Hyde Park. I had no idea. That's crazy. And that was again Cottage Grove and 60th
The
around
same,
there.
yeah, they took over the
Yeah.
footprint of Sanssouci. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was right
Okay.
on the corner.
Okay.
You'll see
Again, thanks,
tenants are
Elaine.
going
And
to
if,
it.
I'd love, so this recording will be available because I know a lot of people who really will want to see this as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We'll put it up on the Chicago Hyde Park Village YouTube page. Just go to chpv.org
Right.
and then up, and I'll just stick that in the chat there. Up in the corner, there's a link to our YouTube channel.
Great.
And
Great.
Trish,
Thank you.
Great.
may I ask a question, Trish? Your pronunciation of the beer garden, the brewery on 18th Street, is that a Chicagoism? I mean, you pronounce it Schoen, and I would have pronounced it Schoen.
I had heard it like that, but as I said, this is all very recent research, so I'm not sure who pronounced it how, when. But I had already heard that name pronounced that way. So
Maybe like Goethe Street, it may be a
Yeah.
Chicagoism.
yeah, it lasted into the 1950.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
by the way, all of us who drive by it all the time notice the lovely six-pointed star, which is, of course, the brewer's mark, not a Star of David.
Yeah, I had to cut a whole bunch of little side points, and that was one of them. But yeah, it was very interesting when I saw that.
There's an interesting question in the chat from Osa. Did breweries have any kind of physical effect on the environment, such as
Yeah.
rivers?
So one of the interesting things about the Schoenhofen, or however anybody who said it, brewery, was that it had an artesian well that was 1,600 feet deep. So it was making it with pure artesian water. So that's one piece I knew. I don't know. I mean, obviously they probably did, but I haven't seen the breweries are kind of gone by the time people are worrying about environmental issues. So it's not something I bumped into as a conversation about what the costs were. I'd have to look at a place where the breweries existed long, when the environmental movement gets going.
And certainly
I mean,
comes
they're
up a
dumping
lot.
animal parts into the Chicago River. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
it's not anything anybody is thinking about for a long
No.
time.
Yeah. Certainly in a lot of current conversations with craft breweries and such. I hear a lot about it, about just how a lot of breweries want to be good environmental stewards with all of the water that they dump back into the system after brewing and cleaning their equipment and such. And then conversely too, the environment has a big impact on beer and brewing with as just it's always like a scramble with climate change to stay on top with highly genetically engineered malts and hops to create new malt and hop strains that are resistant to climate change and new pest infestation and all of that. So yeah, it's a little bit of an arms race there. I even heard of one brewer, I can't remember off the top of my head, that produced an intentionally awful beer, saying like this is what the beer of the future will taste like if with massive global climate change, bad hops, bad malts, bad water.
Oh golly.
Well, yeah.
Lucas, you want to tell us why you're so knowledgeable about beer?
Yeah.
Some people may not know.
I am a beer brewer, a home brewer. I've been for about 15 years. And a bit of additionally a beer historian, but I focus on much more of the ancient stuff, not the recent stuff we've been talking about. Plus, I'm a board member of the Beer Culture Center in Chicago. So yeah, it's like a beer history and culture center. Yeah. So yeah, beer nerd, definitely.
I'd be interested in the people who've had their hands up, Dottie and Emmett and Gary.
Oh, I didn't mean to put my hand up, sorry.
Okay.
Well, I think that was a thumbs up. So thanks, Diane.
Yeah, it was a thumbs
Yeah.
up. It was a
Yeah.
thumbs up, definitely a thumbs up.
Thank you, Trish.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was,
Excellent.
when I really started digging into it, I said, oh my goodness, is there going to be a talk? Because I said, there aren't any Germans.
Yeah,
Can-
it's in
can-
2
can-
weeks there's a prayer party at the village drop-in. But my question was about the other side, why they seemed to be more adamant here. Of course, the Morgan Park areas were pretty pro-dry stuff too, and some on the a few areas on the north side. But why so much Hyde Park? Is it that so many of them came from upstate New York and Ohio, the burned over area, or because the Presbyterian Church was so strong, and the Methodist, or what was it that made Hyde Park so strong on that? I know Paul Cornell had a strong personality, but he was a pretty genial man also. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's all.
That's another talk.
Methodists, Presbyterians. I mean, the very first church is the Presbyterian Church. And also the idea that they were controlling. They weren't against drinking in the sense that you could drink at home. They were always very clear. They were temperance. They were anti-saloon. That was a different culture.
Versus the Baptist and Methodist.
Yeah, my grandmother was WCTU, so she was a Methodist. Yeah. So the Methodists were going to boycott. They were part of the. I didn't talk about that. So one of the
Sunday thing, yeah.
Yeah, when they started saying they're going to open on Sunday, the Methodists said they weren't coming, and the Presbyterians said they weren't going to come. And that obviously didn't happen because my great grandmother did come to the fair.
Where was the first Presbyterian church?
On 53rd. So Presbyterians are part of the, the one that's on Blackstone and 53rd. It's
okay. I think that's enough for another talk.
Yeah,
isn't
it is.
Yes.
There's lots more.
Oh, there's so many churches in Hyde Park. It's amazing.
Well, again, we want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good.
Yes.
Trish, would there be enough information for a talk on the Swedes in Hyde Park?
Oh, yeah, I can do the Swedes. I already wrote about them for the Herald. So
Okay, that would be fun.
Well,
that's what I was expecting.
Margarita will have something to say about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was expecting to find the Germans were like the Swedes, which I had already researched. So that's why I said, oh, sure, I can talk about the Germans.
Yeah.
Here.
Well, thank you. Unless people have more questions, I think we've exceeded our time, but it's enjoyable. We hope you come back again with another topic. You always informative for us, and
Thanks.
Great insights.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Fair.